Assalamualaikum. So in this video, our group will present about inflation and deflation problem during and after Movement Control Order MCO in Malaysia due to COVID-19 outbreak. So for the beginning of this video, I will explain to all of you what is inflation and what is deflation. Inflation is defined as a persistent and sustained increase in the aggregate or average price level of goods and services in an economy. Inflation implies that there is an increase in the cost of living that causes lower purchasing power. It is the situation where there is too much money chasing too few goods. Consumer purchasing power will be affected when inflation is high, as the value of money will be lower. There are two types of inflation. First is demand pull inflation. This type of inflation is caused by excess demand in a fully employed economy. Demand pull inflation occurs when aggregate demand exceeds the aggregate supply. The second type of inflation is cost push inflation. It is caused by a decrease in aggregate supply due to an increase in the cost of production for each unit of output produced. Next, deflation is a decrease in general price level of goods and services. In another way, deflation is negative inflation. During deflation, the purchasing power of currency rises over time. When it occurs, the value of currency also grows over time. Thus, more goods and services can be purchased for the same amount of money. In this situation, consumers will spend their money to buy goods. Hence, deflation is widely regarded as an economic problem that can intensify a recession. In addition, deflation could be caused by a direct reduction in expenses and payments. Also, it can occur if there is a reduction in government spending rates, investment spending, or individual spending. The process of deflation often leads to a lower demand in the market and economy.
So, let's take a look what is going on with economy around the world during COVID-19.
Developments in consumer prices over the next several years are likely to display shifting patterns. In the midst of the partial shutdown of much of the global economy, demand has plummeted, and many producers of goods will mark down prices due to their own financial conditions. There will be sales online and in the stores. We're likely to see a string of 6 to 9 months where consumer prices decline. By the fourth quarter, we could be more than a few percentage points below the same period a year ago. Eventually, the rebuilding of the economy takes hold, prices find their low points, the monthly price index numbers start to incrementally rise. Much further down the road, several years at least, there is even the concern that inflation might reappear with intensity. This concern stems from the massive expansion of central bank balance sheets and the huge government deficit spending occurring around the world. For now, though, monitoring the price declines and potential deflation is the narrative of the day.
The COVID-19 pandemic has led any countries to apply social distancing, lockdown, and travel restriction, which have resulted in a collapse in the world economy. The reduction in productivity has created a negative supply shock, and manufacturing productivity has slowed down due to the global supply chain. In Malaysia, there has been recent concern about deflationary trend. As you can see from the statistic here, during the early period of the movement control order, the statistic sloping down to negative started in March 2020 with negative 0.2%. As it turned to April, Malaysia's deflation rate suddenly dropped rapidly to negative 2.9%, followed by May 2020. There are many possibilities due to deflation in Malaysia. First of all, it's because of the oversupply of goods in the market. They force the businesses to decrease the price and persuade consumers to purchase the goods. Next, a shortage of money in circulation is because many people are losing their jobs during the movement control order. It is because they rather keep it for the future if something emergency happens rather than spend it. The negative growth in April 2020 was not caused by a drop in demand among consumers. However, it was caused by the drastic drop in the cost of transport following a drop in global oil prices. The CPI of transport fell to negative 21.5%. This happened because of the Russia-Saudi Arabia oil price war, which started in March, just 10 days before Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, who imposed the movement control order. Since the coronavirus pandemic began, the inflation rate for communication has increased monthly. In March, the rate of price index was 1.5% and April was 1.6%. This is happening because of the rising demand for courier services, and people want to prevent being infected from COVID-19, and they turning to courier and shipping agents to buy goods online. Next, the inflation rate for food and non-alcoholic beverage has increased as well. The price index in March and April remained the same at 1.2%, which means the demand also remained consistent. Meanwhile, miscellaneous goods and services have increased the prices by 2.6% in March due to higher demand for appliances and products for personal care. Fortunately, in April, it dropped by 3%, which is 2.3%. Last but not least, the cost of health has increased as well in March by 1.4%. It is because a rising negative in the health of the community affected the cost of expenses to treat them. On the other hand, in April, inflation has decreased by 1.2%. It shows that the cost of health has decreased.
Next, I will talk about the ways government overcome the problem of economic during pandemic COVID-19.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought dramatic economic changes around the world. Many industries have been forced to shut down or restructure operations, and governments have run large budget deficits to fund extensive support programs. Historical experience suggests that these changes are likely to lead to subtle inflationary and deflationary dynamics during pandemic. Following the global crisis, overcoming inflation and deflation has become the main responsibility of every country around the world. It is because these problems can threaten the economy in the long term if the government did not take any action against this issue. Based on our analysis of the current economy, we found that Malaysia is facing inflation and deflation during this pandemic. It looks like deflation is becoming worse to our country since COVID-19 hit Malaysia in January. There are some ways to overcome deflation for these current economic problems that have two types of tools, which are monetary policy tools and fiscal policy tools. First of all, from monetary policy tools, government open market operation, which is OMO. Central banks buy treasury securities in the open market and in return issue newly created money to the seller. This increases the money supply and encourages people to spend those dollars. If the supply of money is increased, it should become less expensive. Each dollar would buy less stuff, and so price would go up instead of down. In addition, the government also uses fiscal policy tools to overcome deflation. Here are some ways from fiscal policy tools that the government uses, which is to increase government spending. Keynesian economists advocate using fiscal policy to spur aggregate demand and pull an economy out of a deflationary period. If individuals and businesses stop spending, there is no incentive for firms to produce and employ people. The government can step in as a spender of last resort with hopes of keeping production going along with employment. The government can even borrow money to spend by incurring a fiscal deficit. Business and their employees will use the government money to spend and invest until price begin to rise again with demand.
Okay, next I will explain more detail about the way how to overcome inflation during COVID-19 in Malaysia. First of all, government can use direct control because during pandemic COVID-19, many people in Malaysia have lack of their job and lack of their source of income. From there, government must to control price and rationing. Government has to control directly on price of certain good. More important if it involve essential items such as cooking oil, rice and petrol. An increase in saving is necessary during COVID-19 to reduce disposable income and hence personal consumption expenditure. Malaysia should not be extravagant in spending because people are not in a position to save voluntarily and due to the rising cost of living. However, the government should to introduce compulsory provider fund or provider fund pension scheme in increase in saving and in to controlling inflation. Therefore, it is responsibility of the government and central bank to control that money supply to be regulated and ensure that money supply does not grow rapidly than a real output of the economy. Furthermore, the government can also use contractionally fiscal and monetary policy to overcome inflation in our country by decrease the aggregate demand. For the contractionally fiscal policy, the government can reduce inflationary pressure on its economy by implementing a budget supplies. Two tools of budget supplies are reducing government expenditure and increasing tax of decrease aggregate demand. Next is contractionally monetary policy. The central bank can reduce the money supplies through different monetary instruments like open market operation, raising the required reserve ratio, calling for special deposit and increasing rate of interest. This measure will reduce money creation, consumption and investment so that aggregate will be fall. In rationing, people in Malaysia are given coupon or voucher during pandemic COVID-19 because we have to stay at home and work from home. In Malaysia, we have financial assistance to give it to community, but it divided into several groups like P40, 220 and M40. The group are given based on the monthly income and the ability to support the family. Based on that, the government is taking steps to reduce problem by involving people during pandemic of COVID-19. Therefore, the government hope this will help some of those people and be able to provide some shortcoming that by face by all the people in Malaysia.
For the conclusion, this pandemic COVID-19 had given the impact on Malaysia. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, decided to make a movement control order, or we call MCO, to prevent this pandemic. After the MCO, Malaysia economy was down because the economy is deteriorating due to no important economic factor for it to run normally, which has been implemented for months. However, the occurrence of inflation has been due to the demand that exists without large production until the occurrence of price increases. This happens when the MCO is running. The parties that produce the essential material do not run as usual and they are not be able to produce their product. On the other hand, the household cannot buy the goods because no production is made by certain parties. And when the MCO is over, the firm can produce their product as usual, but the demand will increase due to the people not getting the good during the MCO because of the lack of stock sold in store or shopping mall. Many parties, including the government, who incur a loss as a result of what they carry out, were stopped for months and they did not get a profit. To conclude, we can say that inflation and deflation are part of a business cycle which we can not control using the easiest way. Besides, we can only do preventive measure, monitor their circulation, and overcome this problem wisely.
Girl, I'm your candy.